The soft revolution, when your silence stops being survival and becomes self sabotage. I recently sat down with Tawanna Garner, a woman whose decision to break 4 decades of silence is reshaping how we understand healing, faith, and freedom. Tawana is not just a survivor, she is a healer, a disruptor, and a voice for women who have carried pain so quietly for so long that they forgot what their own voice sounded like. Her work is creating sacred space for Black women to finally exhale, to finally speak, to finally be free. And what she shared with me during our conversation on the Soft Girl Era podcast is something I believe every woman, every human being needs to hear. Let me start with something that might make you a little uncomfortable, which honestly is kind of the point. There are women sitting in church pews right now, leading boardrooms, raising children, managing households, who are carrying secrets that are slowly killing them. Not dramatically, not visibly, but quietly, in the hidden places where shame lives and silence breeds. And the most heartbreaking part, many of them believe that keeping those secrets is what makes them strong, that silence is loyalty, that speaking truth is betrayal. But here's what Tawana helped me understand, and what I want you to hear today. Silence was survival, but it was never your assignment. Let that sit for a moment. Silence was survival, but it was never your assignment. For so many Black women, silence became the only tool we had to protect ourselves in environments that were unsafe, unpredictable, or unwilling to believe us. We learned early that speaking up could cost us everything: our safety, our family's approval, our place in the community. So we swallowed our pain, we compartmentalized, we performed strength, we became experts at functioning while carrying wounds that never healed. And listen, there is no judgment here. Survival mechanisms are not character flaws, they are evidence of your resilience. They are proof that you did what you had to do to make it through. But here's the shift Tawana invites us into: survival is a season, not a destination. You were created for more than endurance, you were created for freedom. During our conversation, Tawana shared insights that cut straight to the heart of what so many women are experiencing. She talked about the cultural conditioning that teaches Black women to keep family secrets, to protect household images, to prioritize everyone else's comfort over our own safety. She talked about the spiritual confusion of loving God while carrying deep wounds and wondering why he didn't protect us. She talked about the shame that lives in the gap between what happened to us and what we were told we should never speak about. And she talked about the moment everything changed, the moment God met her in her pain and said, "It's time to speak." Now, I want to be clear about something. This is not a message that demands you disclose your trauma publicly or rush into healing before you're ready. This is not about performing recovery or proving your strength by sharing your story before you've had time to process it. This is about recognizing that the silence you've been carrying, the silence that once protected you, may now be the very thing keeping you from the freedom God has for you. Tawana's journey mirrors the journeys of so many women who have walked this path before her. Think about Oprah Winfrey, who carried the weight of childhood sexual abuse in silence for decades before finally speaking her truth. Born into poverty in rural Mississippi, Oprah was sexually abused beginning at age 9 and became pregnant at 14. Her abuse occurred within a context of poverty, limited resources, and family dysfunction. Like many survivors, she internalized the message that speaking about what happened would bring shame to her family and herself. She learned to compartmentalize, to perform strength, and to move forward without processing the trauma. For decades, her pain lived beneath the surface of her extraordinary professional accomplishments. The primary challenge Oprah faced was the cultural and familial expectation of silence. In Black communities, there is often an unspoken code: what happens in the home stays in the home. Additionally, Oprah struggled with shame, self blame, and the fear that disclosing her abuse would undermine her credibility and authority. She carried the weight of believing that her trauma defined her worth. But Oprah's breakthrough came through intentional healing work, therapy, and eventually public disclosure. She made the courageous decision to break the silence by sharing her story publicly, first in interviews and later through her platform. This act of vulnerability transformed her narrative from one of victimhood to one of agency and redemption. She refused to allow shame to dictate her story. By speaking her truth, Oprah reclaimed her narrative and gave permission to millions of other Black women to do the same. Her disclosure normalized conversations about childhood sexual abuse within Black communities and demonstrated that healing and extraordinary success are not mutually exclusive. She moved from survival to thriving and from silence to influence. Oprah's story is important because it dismantles the myth that silence is required for success. She proved that you can be extraordinary and still be carrying pain. She proved that speaking your truth does not diminish your power, it amplifies it. And she proved that healing and success are not mutually exclusive. You can have both, you deserve both. Then there's Ayanla Van Zant, a spiritual teacher and healer who survived childhood sexual abuse, domestic violence, and systemic trauma. Ayanla was born in Philadelphia and experienced multiple forms of abuse throughout her childhood and early adulthood. Like many Black girls, she was taught to be strong, to keep family business private, and to move forward without processing trauma. She carried the weight of abuse, abandonment, and shame into her adult relationships and spiritual practice. For years, she functioned, she worked, she mothered, she survived, but she was not free. Like Tawanna, Iyanla carried her pain while maintaining faith. She loved God, she served God. But there were places in her heart she kept hidden, places where shame lived and silence reigned. And she struggled with the question so many survivors ask: if God loves me, why did this happen? Why didn't he protect me? This spiritual crisis, combined with her trauma, created a profound internal conflict. Iyanla's healing came through a spiritual awakening and intentional inner work. She pursued therapy, spiritual practice, and ultimately made the decision to speak her truth publicly. She recognized that her pain was not punishment, and that God's love was not conditional on her silence. She began to reframe her suffering as material for ministry, as a foundation for helping others heal. Through speaking her truth and doing deep spiritual work, Yanla transformed from a woman bound by shame into a healer and guide for millions. She created a platform through books, television, and speaking where other Black women could witness healing in action. Her willingness to be vulnerable gave others permission to seek their own wholeness. She moved from survival to purpose, from silence to influence, from shame to freedom. And then there's Tarana Burke, the founder of the Me Too movement. Tarana experienced sexual abuse as a child and carried that trauma in silence for years. Like Tawana, she internalized shame and learned to function while carrying deep wounds. But Tarana's awakening came when she realized that her silence was not only harming her, it was enabling a culture of abuse to persist. She began to understand that speaking her truth was not just about personal healing, it was about collective liberation. Tarana began by creating safe spaces for survivors to share their stories without shame or judgment. She developed the phrase "Me Too" as a simple but powerful affirmation. You are not alone. She built a movement that centered the voices of Black women and other marginalized survivors who had been historically silenced. She refused to let her pain remain private. Instead, she made it communal and transformative. The Me Too movement became a global phenomenon that gave voice to millions of survivors. It shifted cultural conversations about sexual abuse, accountability, and power dynamics. It demonstrated that breaking silence is not weakness, it is revolutionary. Tarana's work showed that individual healing and collective transformation are interconnected. What these women have in common and what Tawanna embodies is the understanding that breaking silence is not weakness. It is revolutionary. It is redemptive. It is the beginning of freedom. But here's the part that I think is most important. And this is what Tawanna emphasized during our conversation. Shame is a liar, and healing is your birthright. Shame thrives in secrecy and dies in the light of truth. What happened to you is not a reflection of who you are. The abuse, the silence, the confusion, none of it was your fault, and none of it disqualifies you from God's purpose. Healing is not reserved for those who speak up immediately. It is not limited by time. It is not dependent on perfect circumstances or the right support system showing up when you needed it. God's healing is sovereign, intentional, and available to you right now in this season, exactly as you are. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be perfectly healed before you take the first step. You just have to be willing to let God meet you where you are. And here's the beautiful redemptive truth that Tawana shared. Your pain can be transformed into purpose without minimizing your journey. Redemption does not erase what happened. Transformation does not mean your suffering was meant to be. Rather, God, in his sovereignty, can take what was meant to destroy you and redirect it toward healing others. Your testimony becomes a lighthouse for women still navigating darkness. Your freedom becomes permission for others to seek their own. This is not toxic positivity. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is the redemptive power of God working through broken vessels to create wholeness in others. Now, I know some of you are sitting here thinking, but Leanne, you don't understand. My family will never forgive me if I speak. My church will judge me. People will think less of me. And I hear you. I really do. But I want to ask you something. How much longer are you willing to carry shame that was never yours to begin with? How much longer are you willing to protect people who did not protect you? How much longer are you willing to live in survival mode when freedom is available? Because here's the truth: the people who need you to stay silent are not the people who have your best interest at heart. The people who need you to keep secrets are not the people who are concerned about your healing. And the people who would judge you for speaking your truth are not the people whose opinions should dictate your freedom. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And speaking it does not make you disloyal, it makes you brave. Tawanna's story and the stories of women like Oprah, Iyanla, and Tarana remind us that healing is possible at any stage of life. It is never too late to seek freedom. It is never too late to speak your truth. It is never too late to step into the fullness of who God created you to be. You are not broken. You are not disqualified. You are not too damaged to be used by God. You are a survivor. You are resilient and you are worthy of healing, wholeness, and freedom. So here's what I'm asking you to do: not tomorrow, not next week, today, right now. Choose one truth about your pain that you have never spoken aloud and share it with one trusted person. Not on social media, not in a public forum, just one person, a close friend, a therapist, a faith leader, someone you trust. Tell them something you've been carrying in silence. Name something you've been afraid to acknowledge. Say the words: I need to tell you something I've never told anyone. Why does this matter? Because silence thrives in isolation. Speaking, even to one person, breaks the power of secrecy and begins the process of reclaiming your narrative. You are not required to share your story publicly or to process it all at once. You are simply invited to take one step toward freedom. by refusing to let your pain remain entirely hidden. And as you speak this truth, pay attention to what happens. Notice if shame decreases. Notice if you feel lighter. Notice if speaking your truth to a safe person changes how you see yourself. This is the beginning of healing. This is the start of recognizing that your silence was survival, but it is not your assignment. God sees you. He has never abandoned you. He was there in your darkest moments, even when you couldn't feel him. And he is here now inviting you into freedom. Not because you've earned it, not because you've performed perfectly, but because you are his beloved daughter and he wants you whole. Your silence was survival, but your voice is your freedom. And the world is waiting to hear it. So speak. Speak boldly, speak truthfully, speak without apology, because the moment you do, you give permission to someone else who's been waiting in the shadows. You become the lighthouse, you become the permission, you become the proof that freedom is possible. And that changes everything.